You didn't just lose me, you lost the version of me that protected you from your own consequences. My dear chosen one, let that sink in for a second, because that line isn't just a quote, it's a mirror. The very people who tried to play you, downplay you, and talk over you are now quietly living with a truth they'll never confess out loud. They didn't break you, they upgraded you. Chosen one, you were the calm before the storm. They're the reason the storm started moving. You walk into a room now, and it's funny how everything changes. The jokes get weaker, the loud ones get quieter. Eyes suddenly discover the floor, the wall, the phone, anything but your face. They'll swear it's nothing. They'll pretend they don't feel it. But you and I both know what's really happening. They feel the shift. They feel that grounded, unshakable power sitting in your chest like a loaded truth. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to roll your shoulders. Your energy says, I survived everything you threw at me, and I'm not here to play anymore. My chosen ones, you were never meant to stay small just to keep other people comfortable. They tried to convince you that your softness was a flaw and your kindness was a weakness. Remember that? You're too nice. You're too sensitive. You're not built for this world. Cute. Those same mouths are quiet now. Those same critics are watching from the shadows, wondering when exactly they lost access. Was it the day you stopped explaining yourself? The day you stopped picking up the phone? The day your silence stopped sounding like surrender and started sounding like a verdict? Right now you might be thinking, did I become cold? Did I become the bad one because I finally changed? Let me answer that before the doubt even finishes forming in your mind. No, chosen one. You didn't turn into the villain. You stopped volunteering to be the victim. There's a difference. You didn't lose your heart. You just stopped handing it to people who treat feelings like disposable cups. You didn't become ruthless. You became selective. And people who were benefiting from the old you will always call the new you harsh. Think back to how hard you tried to stay gentle. You swallowed your truth just to keep the peace. You laughed things off that cut you deep. You forgave people who never even acknowledged what they did. You kept showing up for those who left you hanging. You dimmed your own light so they wouldn't feel threatened standing next to you. And they mistook all of that for weakness. They thought patience meant permission. They thought kindness meant control. They thought the halo they imagined over your head was a handle they could grab whenever they needed to pull you around. And then something snapped, didn't it? That one betrayal that felt like someone reached under your ribs and twisted. That one humiliation that replayed in your mind every night. That one goodbye that didn't just close a door, it collapsed the floor beneath you. You thought that moment was going to destroy you. It didn't. It flipped the switch. It woke up the side of you that had been asleep since childhood. The part of you that always held back, not because you were weak, but because you didn't want to hurt anyone. You were a storm pretending to be a drizzle, a flame pretending to be a spark, a lion pretending to be a house cat, just so people wouldn't be scared. That wasn't weakness. That was self-control. That was power under lock and key. But my dear chosen ones, they kept picking the lock. They kept poking, testing, pushing, assuming you'd never turn around. Until one day you did. And here's the twist they choke on. You still didn't become cruel. You didn't start drama. You didn't throw dirt on their name. You didn't waste your time plotting revenge. You did something much more dangerous. You healed. You detached. You upgraded. You turned your pain into a filter and your past into a firewall. Now their messages hit the wall and slide down. Their attempts to circle back feel like spam. Their names don't make your chest tighten anymore. That's not coldness, chosen one. That's emotional clean air. Right now, some of them are replaying every conversation in their head, asking themselves, when did I lose them? What did I do? And the answer is simple. Everything they swore didn't matter. The jokes that weren't jokes, the you're overreacting moments, the half-hearted apologies, The taking, while calling you too much when you finally needed something back. They didn't just create distance, they built the bridge you walked away on. Before we move forward, Chosen One, take a moment to honor the power you're stepping into. If this message is hitting your spirit with truth, if you feel that shift rising in your chest, then support this mission by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your engagement isn't just a button press, it's fuel. It keeps us creating the kind of inspiring, life-changing and electrifying content that speaks to warriors like you. When you support this work, you help amplify the message so more chosen ones can rise beside you. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's continue this transformation together. My chosen ones, hear this clearly. You were an angel all along, but they insisted on seeing how far they could push your limits. They weren't ready for the moment the halo stopped being a target and became armor. They weren't prepared for your other side, the version of you that loves with discernment, forgives with boundaries, and walks away with no announcement, no explanation, no regret. If this is hitting your chest right now, that's not an accident. It means your other side is already awake. It means you're done shrinking for people who were never on your level. It means you've stepped into that quiet, unshakable power that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't prove. Stay with me, Chosen One. Your story isn't just changing from this point on, it's flipping. Chosen One, before we step any deeper into this awakening, let me speak directly to the power you're carrying right now. Your presence here is not an accident, it's a signal. Every like, every subscribe, every comment you leave isn't just support for this channel. It's you claiming your evolution out loud. So if this message is stirring something alive in you, show your strength. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments to mark the moment you stopped hiding the side they forced you to unleash. Your support keeps this fire burning and helps us bring more raw, transformative, energy-packed messages to chosen ones just like you. And now, let's walk into the next chapter step by step. Stay with me, because if you're truly a chosen one, you're about to recognize every sign of the power that was inside you all along, long before they pushed you to reveal your other side. Let's begin. Number 1. When they grabbed your light like a weapon and learned it cuts both ways. When they grabbed your light like a handle and learned it was a blade the whole time. You didn't lose control. Someone just grabbed the wrong part of you and cut themselves on the truth. My dear chosen ones, let's call this moment what it really is. The chapter where the people who underestimated you finally choke on the consequences they built with their own hands. They poked at you like you were some harmless spark, never realizing you were the kind of flame that burns quietly until someone gets too close. They treated your calm like an invitation, your patience like a weakness, your softness like a door they could slam whenever they felt powerful. And now that same door is locked, reinforced, and welded shut, and they can't understand why their old tricks don't work anymore. You might be wondering right now, why did they think they could get away with it for so long? Why me? Let me answer you directly, chosen one. Because you made compassion look effortless. You made gentleness look natural. You made understanding look like a language only you could speak fluently. And people who are starving for control always mistake generosity for permission. You didn't make a mistake. They misread the map. They thought your glow meant you were safe to step on. They didn't know your glow had depth, edges, layers, and a whole other side they were never meant to witness. Look at them now. Look how fast their swagger evaporated when you finally stood still instead of bending. Look how disoriented they became the moment your silence stopped carrying apologies and started carrying boundaries. My chosen one, your silence became a sentence, a full verdict. They begged for the version of you that let them win. They never imagined you'd become the version of you that didn't even play. They always felt that power inside you. That's the part they'll never admit. They sensed there was something steady, sharp, and untouchable beneath your kindness. They just prayed you'd never tap into it. They hoped you'd stay in the version of yourself that was convenient for them, the one who forgave without being asked, who stayed loyal without being valued, who offered grace like it was infinite. They fed off that part of you like it was theirs to consume. But here is where everything flipped. You learned the difference between being kind and being used. And once a chosen one learns that difference, the whole story changes. Isn't it funny, chosen one, how people only call you too much after you stop letting them drain you? Isn't it strange how they call you cold the moment your boundaries stop bending for their comfort? Isn't it interesting how your energy suddenly feels different when you stop shrinking to make them feel taller? Their confusion is not confusion. It's guilt wearing a cheap mask. Think back to the signs, the jokes that weren't jokes, the disrespect they brushed off as you're being dramatic, the way they twisted your sincerity and mocked your exhaustion. They really believed you would hold their mess forever. They thought your halo was something they could yank like a leash. They thought your heart was unlimited, your patience infinite, your energy refillable on command. But no, chosen one, you evolved. Not into something darker, not into something colder, into something balanced. The part of you that held back for so long finally stepped forward. Not as revenge, but as protection. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. They expected your collapse. They prayed for your breakdown. They were ready to celebrate your silence. What they weren't ready for was your awakening. When that awakening happened, it didn't roar. It didn't explode. It didn't announce itself. It unfolded quietly, like a blade being drawn from a sheath, slow, precise, inevitable. And the moment your tone shifted, the temperature around you changed. They felt it before they understood it. They sensed it before they saw it. That's why their behavior switched so fast, why the same people who tested your limits are now tiptoeing around the edges of your energy, scared to touch the version of you they created. And here's the part that really hits them. You didn't retaliate. You didn't match their chaos. You didn't throw stones at the glass houses they built. You simply healed. And healing, chosen one, is the one thing they never prepared for. Because healing exposes what they tried to hide. Healing reveals who was hurting you. Healing uncovers every lie, every game, every manipulation. Your growth became a mirror they can't stand to look into. Their biggest fear was never your anger. It was your clarity, your confidence, your boundaries, your peace. They always knew the day you chose yourself would be the day their influence died. And now that day has arrived. They're scrambling, spinning, rewriting history, trying to find their way back into a story they no longer belong in. But let me tell you the truth, my chosen one. You're not the villain. You're the consequence. You're the reflection. You're the moment they realize the version of you they mistreated will never return. And that truth, it hits harder than anything you could have said to them. Because what you stepped into wasn't darkness, it was balance, the version of you who knows when enough is enough, the version who no longer fights for spaces that shrink them, the version who finally understands their worth is not measured by who chooses them, but by who loses them. They pushed you too far, and in doing so, they introduced the world to the side of you that was never meant to be touched, the side that remembers its strength, the side that walks forward without fear, the side that doesn't need permission to rise. And chosen one, this is only the beginning. Number 2, when they played with your peace and accidentally awakened your fire. When they wanted your glow but forgot your fire could burn. They loved you when you were quiet. Now your strength is the noise they can't silence. My dear chosen ones, here's the part of the story where the ones who underestimated you finally learn the lesson they wrote for themselves. They adored your light from a distance, but they never respected the heat that came with it. They thought you were some soft beam of warmth meant to soothe them, guide them, validate them. They wanted the glow without earning the flame, the comfort without respecting the source. But light, real light, never stays silent forever. Light exposes, light reveals. And when your light stopped dimming for their comfort, they finally saw the fire underneath. That's when the fear kicked in. They played with you like you were some harmless spark. Cute, predictable, safe. They thought your patience was a weakness they could tug on. They thought your kindness made you manageable. They swore your silence meant you were incapable of setting boundaries. They painted a naive version of you in their minds because it made their ego feel tall. But chosen one, they forgot one crucial fact. Even the gentlest ember has the power to burn down an entire forest if pushed. You ever notice how people only call you too much once they realize they can no longer take advantage of you? Isn't it interesting how the moment you stop shrinking, they start panicking? Let me answer the question already forming in your mind. Why do they fear me now? Because they finally met the part of you that refuses to be misused. They finally saw the clarity in your eyes, the clarity that exposes their excuses, their lies, their games, and clarity terrifies those who depend on confusion. Chosen one, they loved the version of you that bent for their convenience. They feared the version of you that stood tall. They admired your softness, but never imagined you could sharpen yourself with the same precision. They called you an angel because the word made them feel safe, as if angels were ornaments, pretty, harmless, decorative. They thought you floated, unaware of the weight of everything around you. What they never considered was that real angels walk. Real angels withstand storms that would snap others in half. Real angels don't exist to be stepped on. They exist to stand guard over their own worth. Imagine this, a sword wrapped in velvet, smooth, gentle, comforting on the outside, deadly sharp underneath. They played with the velvet, thinking it made them invincible. Then one day the velvet slipped, and suddenly they were gripping the blade. Whose fault is that? The blade's, or the hand that never learned respect? My dear chosen ones, they never recognized the cost of your mercy. They took it for granted. They stretched it past its limits. They expected it on demand. But mercy is not a bottomless well. Mercy becomes madness when given to those who mock it, and they pushed you past the final drop. They kept testing your patience until they reached the point where patience was no longer possible. They pushed you past understanding, past apologies, past the version of yourself who still believed their pretend innocence. They pushed you straight into the strength they insisted did not exist. You lived for too long around people who expected you to dim your light so they wouldn't feel exposed. People who wanted your love, but not your honesty. People who wanted your presence, but not your power. And when you finally aligned with your truth, when you stepped into the version of yourself that refuses to be mishandled, they called you changed. They whispered that you'd become cold. They claimed you weren't yourself anymore. But the funniest part? They only say that because the version of you they used is gone. They want the angel who swallowed pain so they didn't have to face their own. They want the angel who apologized just to keep the peace they kept shattering. They want the angel who carried the weight of their insecurity on silent shoulders. But you, my chosen one, you reclaimed your wings. And now that you've spread them to their full span, they're horrified by how far they stretch. They never expected your halo to become a shield. They never expected your light to stop softening their shadows. They never expected your fire to expose just how cold their intentions were. Let me answer the other question lingering in your mind. Why do they paint me as the villain now? Because calling you the villain saves them from admitting what they did. Your strength highlights their weakness. Your clarity highlights their confusion. Your evolution highlights their stagnation. You didn't become dark. You became undeniable. And here's the truth they'll never say out loud. You were always powerful. They sensed it before you did. That's why they tried to break you early. That's why they tried to confuse you. That's why they fed you lies and called them facts. They feared the moment you'd wake up to your own worth. They feared the moment your softness would balance itself with strength. They feared the moment your other side, the one you hid to protect them, would finally step forward. But chosen one, this isn't a transformation. This is a return. A return to the version of yourself you suppressed for the comfort of others. A return to the clarity that was always your birthright. A return to the fire you dimmed so no one else would feel exposed. You didn't become someone new. You became someone whole. Your evolution didn't destroy them. It revealed them. And now they finally understand the truth. You were never just light. You were never just soft. You were never just gentle. You were a force, a balance, a flame wrapped in grace. And now that your fire has been unleashed, chosen one, the world can finally see what was always inside you. Number 3, when their attempts to shrink you became the blueprint of your evolution. When they accidentally engineered the very awakening they feared most. They thought they were chipping away at you, chosen one, when in reality they were chiseling out your evolution with their own bare hands. Isn't it wild how the very people who tried to tame you are now trembling at the version of you they activated? It always happens this way. Nothing shakes a coward more than watching the person they tried to keep small rise without hesitation, without apology, and without needing their approval anymore. They wanted quiet compliance. Instead, they got a storm they can't outrun. Let's speak plainly. Before they ever got into your head, you were already a whole tempest wrapped in a human body. You were loud in spirit, brilliant in presence, and undeniably powerful in ways that made them uncomfortable. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your existence highlighted everything dim and underdeveloped inside them. Your confidence exposed their insecurity. Your heart exposed their selfishness. Your clarity exposed their confusion. They didn't want to evolve. They wanted you easy to predict, easy to manage, easy to keep beneath them. You weren't supposed to rise higher. You were supposed to stay where they could reach you. Picture this for a moment. A flame so bright it illuminates every corner of the room. Instead of appreciating it, someone walks up and tells the flame to calm down. Not because it's dangerous, but because their insecurity can't handle the heat. That's exactly what they did to you, chosen one. You glowed too brightly for their fragile comfort, so they tried to dim you. They didn't encourage your voice. They muffled it. They didn't celebrate your qualities. They minimized them. They didn't want your full power. They wanted your compliance. And because you cared, because you were born with empathy stitched into your spine, you listened. You lowered your volume. You clipped your own wings to keep others from feeling overshadowed. You held back your opinions, softened your edges, suppressed your intuition, shrank your roar. You did it to protect people who would never protect you back. You did it because you didn't want to hurt anyone, even when they were hurting you without hesitation. But here's the irony they never saw coming. You weren't breaking. You were storing energy. Every moment of silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Every step back wasn't retreat, it was recalibration. Every time you went inward, you weren't collapsing, you were upgrading. They mistook your stillness for defeat. They mistook your distance for loss. They mistook your quiet for emptiness. But chosen one, you weren't dying, you were transforming. And now they're panicking. Because the version of you they controlled with guilt, manipulation, or emotional games is gone permanently. The soft, overly forgiving, apologetic version of you served their ego beautifully. Your kindness cushioned their flaws. Your patience protected their insecurities. Your softness made them feel superior. But the awakened version of you, the one who sees clearly, the one who sets boundaries, the one who no longer bends at the sound of their voice. That version exposes their mediocrity without saying a single word. You might wonder, why do they suddenly want me back? Why now? The answer is simple. They don't miss you. They miss the access. They miss the version of you who lowered your standards so they wouldn't feel inadequate. They miss the version who tolerated behavior they knew they'd never tolerate themselves. They miss the comfort your softness gave them. But they do not miss the real you, because the real you requires effort, honesty, and growth, things they were never willing to give. When they pushed you into silence, they thought they were winning. What they didn't realize was that silence became your cocoon. It wrapped around you, protected you, and began shaping you into something stronger. When they pushed you into the shadows, they assumed you'd disappear. Instead, the shadows sharpened your instincts, heightened your intuition, and taught you how to see in the dark. The very treatment they used to weaken you became the training ground for your new strength. They mistook your softness for fragility, but they didn't understand that softness is a choice, not a limitation. And when someone abuses that choice long enough, the softness doesn't vanish. It evolves. It becomes precision. It becomes discernment. It becomes a kind of strength that doesn't roar. It reveals. A strength that doesn't fight. It outgrows. A strength that doesn't break. It transforms. And now, Chosen One, what's left of you isn't damaged, it's refined. What's left isn't broken, it's reinforced. What's left isn't vulnerable, it's vigilant. You didn't come out of that cocoon as the same gentle soul they mistreated. You emerged as someone magnificent, elevated, and untouchable. Not in a cruel way, not in a vindictive way, but in a way that makes it impossible for anyone to ever play the same games with you again. They built your awakening, piece by piece, mistake by mistake, lie by lie. And now they're forced to face the upgraded version of the very person they tried to diminish. The version they can no longer manipulate, the version they can no longer reach, the version they can no longer control. Chosen One, you didn't just rise, you rose because of them, and that is their biggest regret. Number 4. When they celebrated your fall, not knowing you were shape-shifting into their lesson. When they celebrated your fall, not knowing you were quietly mutating into their hardest lesson. They always cheer the loudest when they think you're slipping, don't they? The moment you go silent, the moment you take a step back to breathe, to heal, to regroup, they start whispering, "See? Told you they wouldn't last." They cling to the fantasy of your downfall like a bedtime story that tucks their insecurity in at night. Because as long as they believe you're falling, they don't have to face the far more uncomfortable truth that they were the catalyst for your evolution. They convince themselves you're collapsing when, in reality, you're cocooning. They point at your stillness and call it weakness because they don't recognize transformation until it's towering over them. Cowards always scream, "You've changed," when the version of you they created finally stops apologizing for breathing. They act shocked as if they didn't spend months, years even, pushing you toward the edge. They drained your patience, twisted your emotions, and tugged at your compassion until there was almost nothing left to give. Then, when the well finally ran dry, they threw their hands up like victims and pretended your rise was some sudden, unjustified shift. The truth, my dear Chosen One, is far more poetic. They didn't witness your collapse. They witnessed your mutation. They saw the moment your light stopped being something soft they could take advantage of, and instead solidified into armor they no longer knew how to penetrate. Picture this: a feather touched too many times by dirty hands, worn down, disrespected, dismissed. And then one day, without warning, that feather turns to steel. Not because it hated the hands, not because it wished harm, but because it finally recognized what it needed to become in order to survive. That's what your wings did. They didn't fall off, they didn't break, they upgraded. Every betrayal welded another steel plate. Every lie hammered another shield into shape. Every disappointment sharpened a new edge. You didn't descend into darkness. You forged yourself into something unshakable. And here's the part that hits them where it hurts most. The softest parts of your mercy didn't die because you broke. They died because you outgrew the version of yourself that used to hand out compassion to people who only showed up to drain it. You stopped being the life raft for people who watched you drown with dry hands and dry eyes. You stopped being the bridge for people who never intended to cross to meet you. You didn't lose your kindness. You simply stopped offering it where it was never appreciated. Maybe you're asking yourself right now, was I wrong for becoming this version of me? Am I too hardened now, too guarded? Let me answer that thought before doubt gets any louder. No, chosen one, you weren't wrong for evolving. You were only wrong for staying small for people who needed you fragile to feel powerful. They treated you like disposable light, something to switch on when convenient, something to turn off when your glow made them uncomfortable. They depended on your softness to cover up their own shadows. But with every boundary they ignored, every fear they manipulated, every moment they made you question your own reality, they sculpted the very version of you they now fear. You became someone who can walk through fire and not blister, who can move through shadows and not lose direction, who can face chaos and still recognize yourself in the reflection. They didn't just push you into evolution, they forced you into mastery. What they mistook for your breaking point was actually your building phase, and now that you've risen out of the ashes they provided, they're looking up at you like you came out of nowhere. But you didn't. You were being built quietly, piece by piece, in the very places they hoped you'd stay trapped. This isn't a fall, chosen one. This is ascension. Not the pretty kind, not the easy kind, the kind forged in pressure, in betrayal, in disappointment, in truth. The kind that comes from realizing your wings weren't made to carry their weight. You didn't become colder, you became clearer. You didn't become harsher, you became wiser. You didn't become unrecognizable, you became undeniable. They created the version of you who knows both sides. The soft side they exploited and the strong side they never expected to meet. And now that this balanced, awakened, impenetrable version of you stands forward, they can never play with you again. Number 5. When their toxicity stopped penetrating and you became unreachable by design. When their poison lost its power and you became untouchable. There comes a moment, chosen one, when every tactic they relied on suddenly collapses in their hands, and the shock on their faces is almost poetic. This is the chapter where their poison stops spreading, their manipulation stops landing, and their little emotional traps lose their trigger. For so long, they counted on your softness to be your downfall. They believed that if they fed you enough doubt, sprinkled enough guilt, and wrapped their lies in just enough sweetness, you would stay exactly where they wanted you, quiet, confused, and compliant. But here you are, standing in the same place they tried to break you, untouched by the venom they once used to control you. And watching their favorite tricks fail, that's the moment the mask slips off their face. Manipulators panic the moment their magic stops working. It's like watching a magician freeze in real time because the rabbit won't appear. Except in your story, chosen one, you became the rabbit who refused to die. They completely miscalculated who they were dealing with. They thought you were a fragile soul with soft edges and open arms. They never understood that beneath that softness lived a history carved from storms, shadows, and survival. You weren't naive. You were disciplined. You weren't weak. You were choosing peace. You weren't defenseless. You were simply refusing to lower yourself to their level. That's self-restraint. They mistook it for vulnerability. They never imagined it was power waiting for the right moment to awaken. Imagine a creature someone keeps feeding poison to, because they assume the creature can't fight back. At first, the poison hurts. At first, the creature staggers. But over time, something remarkable happens. The poison stops working. The creature adapts. The venom becomes its strength. The same substance meant to kill ends up fortifying it. That creature grows fangs, not to attack, but to survive. And suddenly the predator realizes they are no longer dealing with prey. That chosen one is exactly what happened to you. You tried to stay pure. You tried to stay gentle. You tried so hard to keep your intentions honest and your heart clean, even when they dragged you into chaos. You kept believing if you stayed soft enough, patient enough, forgiving enough, maybe they would meet you halfway. But they were relentless. They injected toxicity into every connection you built. They twisted your kindness into a weapon. They turned your loyalty into leverage. They tried to infect your spirit with doubt, hoping your confusion would cage you. But systems don't collapse when threatened. They evolve. And your evolution wasn't a small shift. It was a full-body upgrade, mental, emotional, energetic. Their poison became your education. Their manipulation became your training. Every lie became an antibody. Every betrayal became reinforcement. Every guilt trip strengthened your immunity. You didn't grow numb. You grew wise. You might be asking yourself, why do I feel nothing now? Why do the same behaviors that once hurt me barely stir a reaction? Let me tell you, chosen one, that's what immunity feels like. It's not coldness. It's clarity. It's not detachment. It's ascension. It's the moment your spirit stops bleeding for people who only come close when they need to take something. Manipulators call it cold because they can't control it. They call it change because they no longer recognize the version of you they once fed on. But this isn't a negative transformation. It's the most powerful self-correction of your life. Now imagine someone trying to punch a brick wall. They throw their fist with full force, expecting you to crumble like before, but all they do is injure themselves. They scream at the wall for not breaking. They call the wall cruel for not reacting, but the wall doesn't move, doesn't flinch, doesn't acknowledge the chaos. That's you now. Their tricks bounce back onto them. Their manipulation rebounds. Their attempts to bait you fall flat. They're hurting themselves with blows meant for you. And their fear, it comes from one realization: you were never weak. You were simply untrained in the manipulation they depended on. Now you're fluent in their language, and you refuse to speak it. You see through every tactic before it even forms. You can predict their moves before they act. You can walk through their storms without getting wet. They can't hijack your emotions anymore. They can't twist your truth. They can't access your peace. They wanted to infect you, but all they did was make you immune. They wanted to weaken you, but they ended up strengthening every part of your identity. They wanted to break you open, but instead they awakened a version of you who can't be touched, tricked, or manipulated ever again. They created the immunity, but you turned that immunity into evolution. And chosen one, this evolved version of you, it's someone they will never, ever be able to handle. Number 6. When your silence turned into the echo that exposed everything they hid. When your silence became the grave. They dug for themselves. When your silence finally arrived, chosen one, it didn't come crashing in like a storm or roaring like a battle cry. It wasn't dramatic, messy, or loud. It slipped in quietly, almost politely, like a shadow stretching across the floor at dusk. And yet that silence carried more weight than every word you ever spoke. It was the sound of your evolution settling into place. The moment they didn't just lose access to your voice, they lost access to the version of you that cared enough to explain, justify, or stay. Your silence became the mirror they refused to look into, and the consequence they never thought they'd have to face. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be distant. Your transformation was slow, steady, and unavoidably honest. It happened the way an eclipse covers the sun, not all at once, but gradually, inch by inch, until everything familiar turns unfamiliar and the world is forced into a new kind of darkness. Every day, you handed out a little less of yourself, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You started noticing where your energy drained too fast, where your smile felt manufactured, where your care felt undeserved. The people who expected the most from you were giving you the least in return, and your spirit finally stopped pretending it didn't hurt. Your silence wasn't born from anger, it was born from exhaustion. You had spent so long pouring into ungrateful hands that your soul simply refused to keep leaking. Every laugh you forced, every apology you didn't owe, every conversation you maintained alone, every problem you solved for people who created their own chaos. Slowly, piece by piece, your spirit withdrew its investment. Your responses became shorter. Your tolerance thinned. Your care felt like lifting something heavy that no longer belonged to you. You didn't push anyone away. They walked themselves out of your emotional orbit by taking you for granted. And then came that morning, chosen one. The morning when everything changed without warning or ceremony. You woke up and the feeling was just gone. Not faded, not weakened. Gone. Like someone had reached into your heart and flipped a clean final switch. The love, the worry, the fear, the desire to fix what was never yours to fix, it all evaporated, not into sadness, but into nothingness. And nothingness, chosen one, is one of the most liberating states you will ever experience. Nothingness means you no longer flinch. It means you no longer bend your boundaries until they break. It means you no longer feel that sharp twist in your chest when someone disrespects you. Nothingness is not coldness. It's clarity wearing armor. It's the moment you realize you've stepped so far out of their reach that they can't even aim their manipulation accurately anymore. For the first time, you are not reacting. You are observing, and they feel that distance like a punishment. Your silence became the grave they dug with their own hands, brick by brick, disrespect by disrespect, betrayal by betrayal. They built that emptiness in you long before it appeared. And now, chosen one, the silence they mocked has become the silence that buries their influence. Their power over you didn't shatter in anger, it dissolved in indifference. And that is what terrifies them the most. They expected you to yell, to fight, to chase, to defend. Anger keeps the connection alive. Anger means you still care. Anger means they still matter. But nothing. Nothing is freedom. Nothing is the final door closing. Nothing is you walking out of the burning house they left you in without looking back, without hesitation, without regret. Nothing means the cord snapped, cleanly, quietly, permanently. You may wonder in your heart, is this wrong? Am I becoming someone I'm not? Let me answer you with truth, chosen one. No, this is not wrong. This is evolution's final form. This is what happens when the part of you that was constantly drained finally remembers it deserves peace. This is what strength looks like when it outgrows the need to be acknowledged. Your nothingness is not emptiness, it is immunity, a shield formed from every lesson, every betrayal, every disappointment. And immunity is something no one can take from you once it's earned. They can shout, they can guilt, they can twist stories, they can pretend to be confused, but they cannot reach you, they cannot trigger you, they cannot drain a well that is no longer theirs to drink from. And whether they admit it or not, they will feel this loss forever. Because losing someone's love is painful, but losing someone's care is devastating. Losing someone's attention hurts, but losing their access is a death blow. They pushed you until the switch flipped, and now they stand at the edge of the silence they created, wondering how it swallowed them whole. Your silence didn't just end the chapter, chosen one. It buried it. Number 7. When your quiet presence became the mirror that cracked their confidence. When your quiet turned into the judgment, they can't outrun. There comes a moment, my chosen one, when silence stops being something soft and becomes something surgical. A moment when the absence of your reaction speaks louder than any clapback you could ever give. And for the people who mistook your voice for something they could control, your quiet becomes the mirror they were never ready to stand in front of. They feel it now, your stillness pressing on their ego like a weight they can't lift. They don't know how to interpret it, they don't know how to navigate it, and that confusion is the justice they never saw coming. Silence in the hands of the chosen ones is not a void. It's a blade sharpened by wisdom. It slices through illusions, through manipulation, through every performance they try to put on. It becomes a throne, yes, a throne, where you sit with a calm so powerful it turns their noise into background static. And while they scramble for attention, hoping the old version of you will reappear, you remain still, unbothered, unreachable. You watch them with the detached clarity of someone who has outgrown the circus and no longer mistakes the clowns for entertainment. They jump through hoops that no longer impress you, trying every trick they can to provoke you back into the emotional arena they once controlled. But that old version of you, the one who explained every misunderstanding, who apologized first to keep the peace, who felt obligated to respond to every accusation, has already been buried. And not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, elegantly, without a single announcement. They didn't even notice the funeral of the version of you they depended on until they realized the new you doesn't play by their rules anymore. And now they're stuck performing in front of someone who no longer applauds. Imagine them on the other side of glass, hands slamming, voices raised, expressions exaggerated, desperate to get a reaction from you. You stand on your side of that window with a steady breath, watching their desperation unfold. Their theatrics don't move you anymore. Their manipulation doesn't pierce you. Their tears don't drag your heart into a battlefield you've already left. Because once a chosen one has tasted real peace, chaos loses all of its flavor. It becomes cheap, predictable, and beneath the level of growth you've achieved. Your silence becomes your sanctuary, and inside that sanctuary, their noise has no power. And in that sanctuary, a question might rise in your mind. Why does my silence bother them so much? Let me answer you clearly, chosen one. Silence bothers them because it exposes everything they tried to hide behind their noise. When you say nothing, they're forced to hear themselves. They're forced to confront the truth that it was never your reactions keeping the connection alive. It was their need for control. Your silence proves what they hoped would never be proven. They never had real power over you. Not your emotions, not your decisions, not your future. So they text you paragraphs, hoping for a single line back. They stir unnecessary drama, hoping to reignite a spark of the old dynamic. They toss your name into rumors, hoping it will pull you down into the mud to defend yourself. But you don't descend, you don't explain, you don't chase, because your silence is not avoidance, it's a verdict, a final ruling, a non-negotiable closure, and that verdict says everything without saying anything at all. They know exactly what it means. It means they no longer influence you. It means they no longer occupy mental space. It means they no longer matter in the way they used to. And that truth, delivered without anger, without words, without effort, is the judgment they can never escape. Number 8. When your stillness became the threshold they crossed and instantly regretted. When your stillness became the trap they walked into. Still water fools the careless because it looks calm, predictable, harmless, until someone steps too far and discovers the depth that can swallow anything built on lies. That's exactly what happened when you stopped responding, chosen one. They mistook your quiet for weakness, not realizing it was the most precise form of strength you've ever used. Your silence wasn't a retreat, it was a recalibration. It was the moment you shifted from defending yourself to observing them, and nothing exposes a person's truth faster than giving them room to reveal it. Your stillness was never about giving up, it was about giving nothing. You refused to give them reactions, explanations, reassurance, or emotional fuel. You stopped performing for people who believed your heart was their entertainment. Anyone can shout, anyone can argue, anyone can let emotions drag them into a battle they were never meant to fight. But it takes a chosen one to stand still, to conserve energy, to close the gates and let the noise stay outside. That's not surrender, that's strategy. The highest form of mastery is knowing when not to engage, especially with people who twist every word into a weapon. Picture this: chosen one. A battlefield where every soldier is swinging, screaming, swinging again, except one. One warrior stands completely still. No weapon in hand, no panic in their eyes, no tension in their shoulders. Just presence, and without a single move, everyone on that field becomes afraid. Not because of what you might do, but because they suddenly realize they don't know what you're capable of anymore. That's the power of your stillness. It creates uncertainty. It magnifies their guilt. It exposes their intentions far louder than any confrontation could. Let me answer the question you're secretly wondering. Do they notice my silence? Chosen one, they notice it more than every word you ever spoke. Your silence bothers them because it forces them to face themselves. It keeps them awake at night, replaying every moment. It makes them question their own behavior, their own motives, their own lies. They can't predict you anymore, and humans fear what they can't predict. They don't know if you're done, if you're healing, if you're rising, or if you're simply observing. And that uncertainty, it terrifies them in ways your presence never did. Your stillness cut off their access, not just to your time, but to your mind. They no longer get to influence your emotions. They no longer get to twist your narrative. They no longer get to walk into your energy whenever it suits them. You didn't just stop talking. You became unreadable, untouchable, unreachable in the best possible way. Your transformation, chosen one, is happening in places they can't enter. Behind mental doors they no longer have keys to. They don't get to see your rebuilding. They don't get to witness your rise. They don't get VIP access to the parts of you that are growing sharper, stronger, clearer. Your evolution is unfolding in silence, in privacy, in depth, where their presence can't contaminate anything. Stillness is not absence. Stillness is preparation. Stillness is the power that grows roots before it grows wings. It's the quiet before your next level breaks through the surface. It's the moment when your soul is upgrading without announcing it to the world. People think explosions make the most impact, but they forget that earthquakes start in silence, deep underground, out of sight, unstoppable once they move. And that's exactly what's happening to you. Your next version is forming without witnesses, and they will not see it coming. They walked into the trap not because you set one, but because they assumed stillness meant safety. They confused quiet with permission. They believed your silence made them victorious. Instead, it made them exposed. Chosen one, the new you isn't rising loudly, it's rising inevitably. Number 9. When your upgraded self stepped into the room and made their old games obsolete. When you evolved into the version they can't touch, not in reality, not in memory, not even in their dreams, the entire balance of power shifted in a way they never expected. They spent so long fearing the softness they misunderstood, the gentleness they mocked, the patience they exploited, that they never bothered to wonder what lived underneath it. They thought your quiet had limits. They assumed your kindness had no armor. They believed your forgiveness meant you would always return. But the part of you they feared the most, the part they labeled as darkness, was never darkness at all. It was the only piece of you they could never manipulate, never bend, never rewrite. And now that it's awake, chosen one, they're standing face to face with a truth they never had the courage to imagine. Once your other side rises, it never goes back to sleep. This isn't a mood swing. This isn't a temporary phase. This isn't you wearing some new costume to look strong. This is your final form, the version of you that no longer asks permission to exist, the version that doesn't shrink to soothe anyone's ego, the version that walks into rooms with a presence that doesn't need to announce itself. And now that it's active, it stands guard like a sentinel woven from instinct and experience, watching everything with a clarity that can't be fooled. You're not paranoid. You're precise. You're not suspicious. You're evolved. Survival sharpened your senses until you could see patterns forming before anyone else even sensed a shift. You learned to read intentions the way others read weather forecasts, subtle changes in tone, slight hesitations, sudden warmth after long cold spells. You started noticing manipulation in the very first sentence. You began recognizing guilt when it disguised itself as nostalgia, and control when it wrapped itself in fake concern. You heard "I miss you" and understood the strategy behind it. You saw "Can we talk?" and knew it wasn't about healing, but about regaining access to your energy. And if you're wondering right now, does this make me cold? Am I becoming someone unrecognizable? Let me stop you right there, chosen one. No, you didn't become cold. You became complete. You didn't lose your light. You learned how to protect it. You didn't lose your empathy. You learned where not to place it. You didn't stop being soft. You stopped being soft for people who weaponize softness against you. You didn't become less angelic. You became a fuller version of what an angel actually is. Not some delicate floating ornament, but a warrior with vision in both directions, toward the light that guides you and the shadows that taught you. You didn't step into darkness. You stepped into balance. And balance is something your enemies can't handle, because they only ever thrived when you were unbalanced, unsure, or unaware of your worth. Now look at them, spiraling, scrambling, sending mutual friends to check up on you, hoping someone else can gather the information they no longer have access to, posting bait on social media, praying you'll fall for the hook, rewriting the entire history in their minds so they can paint themselves as victims of the very story they authored. They never expected to lose the version of you that cared enough to explain yourself. They never expected to lose access to the parts of you that bent for them. They never expected you to evolve into someone unreachable. But that's exactly what happened. They try poking your old buttons, hoping for a familiar reaction, a flicker of the old pain, the old confusion, the old craving for closure. But those buttons, they don't exist anymore. You didn't just heal, you rewired your entire system. Your emotional blueprint shifted from reactive to resilient. Your frequency rose so high that the old tactics suffocate in the atmosphere you now breathe. You're not ignoring them. You've outgrown the version of yourself that even registered their existence. And that, chosen one, is what terrifies them to the core. Not your strength, not your silence, not your evolution, but the fact that you didn't simply move on, you moved beyond. You didn't just detach, you transcended. You didn't just survive, you transformed into the version of yourself they never wanted you to find, the version that cannot be touched, manipulated, accessed, or diminished ever again. You are not just gone from their life, you're beyond their reach, even in their dreams. And now, chosen one, as we step out of this chapter and into the quiet power that follows it, let this truth settle deep into your spirit. You didn't just rise. You reclaimed every part of yourself they hoped you'd never discover. This evolution isn't temporary, it's who you are now. And if this message resonated, if it stirred something awake within you, then show your presence in the loudest, silent way possible. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop 77 in the comments to stamp the moment you embraced your other side. Share this message so other chosen ones can rise beside you.